Trump obsession's very bad. Senate Republicans face issues following weak election showing. On Capitol Hill, there is a flurry of criticism directed at Donald Trump. Republicans are becoming increasingly angry over their failure to win back control of the Senate, and leaders of the Republican Party are at odds with one another over how to proceed while the former president still maintains a dominant hold on the party. The moment of reckoning for the Republican Party has arrived as the party failed to win another crucial Senate seat, this time in Georgia, and watched as the Democrats increased their control to 51-49. Within a few hours of Trump's hand-picked candidate, Herschel Walker, failing to win a Democratic seat, the blame game began in earnest, with a substantial portion of the attention being directed at the previous president. Even if they have Trump's support, many people believe that Republicans who aren't electable should be eliminated from the party in the 2024 election cycle by the party elite, who should take a more active role. Others have argued that the Republican Party ought to support early voting and fully oppose Trump's demagogic advocacy of mail-in voting, both of which contributed to the success of Democratic candidates and candidates for office. And some of the most influential members of the Republican Party have stated that the refusal of the party to reject Donald Trump as their standard-bearer, combined with the denial of the 2020 election that is at the core of his platform, was ultimately their undoing and will cost them again in future elections. It's just one more data point in an overwhelming body of data that shows the Trump obsession is very bad for Republicans, but normal Republicans are doing extremely well, said Republican Sen. Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania, who is retiring and whose open seat was filled by a Democrat. It's just one more data point in an overwhelming body of data that shows the Trump obsession is very bad for Republicans. This introspection on the part of Republicans is taking place at a crucial time for both Trump and the party. The leaders of the Republican Party in the Senate are keen to move on from the Trump years and recruit candidates who have a more moderate and mainstream appeal to the suburban voters who abandoned them because of their distaste for the previous president. But they are up against a powerful and vocal faction within their party that is aligned with Trump. This is especially true in the incoming House GOP majority, where a hard-right bloc now holds major sway over GOP leader Kevin McCarthy and his pursuit of the speakership. They argue that the party needs to return to its fundamentally conservative principles, but they are facing opposition from that faction. And for Trump, the loss in Georgia is the latest in a growing list of political problems that have caused a new rift within his party and raised major questions about his viability as a presidential candidate in 2024. This loss comes on the heels of a series of other political setbacks that have occurred recently. After his dinner at Mar-a-Lago with prominent anti-Semites and subsequent call for the termination of the U.S. Constitution, many people on Capitol Hill see the loss in Georgia, along with shortfalls in Nevada, Arizona, and Pennsylvania, as the final breaking point between him and his party. This comes in the wake of his dinner at Mar-a-Lago with prominent anti-Semites. Even a fervent supporter like South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham has remarked that Donald Trump needs to prove to his party that he is capable of turning things around. According to Graham, who was interviewed by CNN, "I think he's in a strong situation to gain the nomination, but he's got to prove to people he can win. And the more individuals that enter the race, I think probably the better it will be, because then you'll have some points of comparison," said the speaker. Graham continued by saying, he's still quite well-liked within the party. People have a positive opinion of his presidency. They admire his willingness to put up a fight. But the question remains, is it even possible for him to triumph? Others exhibited a much higher degree of skepticism. According to Senator John Thune of South Dakota, the Republican Party's number 2 leader, the party attempted to focus the 2022 midterm elections on President Joe Biden and Democratic policies that they argued were making inflation worse and intensifying problems at the U.S.-Mexico border. Thune said this was done in an effort to discredit the Democratic Party. However, when President Trump campaigned for candidates late in the election season, such as he did for Republican Senate nominees Adam Laxalt in Nevada and Mehmet Oz in Pennsylvania, it provided Democrats with new material to use when they were out campaigning. In an election year where it should have been a referendum on the current administration and their policies, the Dems were in many cases able to turn it into a choice election because of Trump's presence out there, Thune said in an interview with CNN. In many cases, the Dems were able to turn it into a choice election because of Trump's presence out there. So, was he a contributing factor? I don't believe there is any room for debate on that point. Thune went even further with his critique. I don't believe independent voters were having it when a lot of the candidates who had problems in these elections ran on the 2020 election being stolen, Thune said. A lot of the people who had problems in these elections. There were some dissenting voices. When I talked to people, what they wanted to know is if their votes are never going to be diluted, said Senator Rick Scott, a Republican from Florida and the departing head of the National Republican Senatorial Committee. Scott is a member of the National Republican Senatorial Committee. In my opinion, that was the most significant aspect. One of the strategic considerations that are currently up for debate is whether or not to participate more actively in the primary election in 2024 in order to prevent the issues that arose in 2022. The upcoming election cycle will feature a Senate map that is far more advantageous for Republicans, with Democrats having to defend 23 seats and Republicans having to defend 11 seats. The states of Ohio, Montana, and West Virginia each have one of those Democratic seats, and Trump has won both of those states twice. When asked on Wednesday if he will run to defend the seat he's held since 2007, Democratic Senator Jon Tester of Montana responded, "Still got to talk to my wife, but we'll let you know when we do make the decision." Tester has occupied the seat since 2007. However, the probable Republican primary in his state could provide a glimpse into how Republicans will manage disagreements inside the party in the years to come. In contrast to the 2022 election cycle, in which Scott decided not to participate in the primaries held by the NRSC, there are many who advocate for a stricter approach to the elimination of candidates whom they deem to be unelectable. Senator Steve Daines, a Republican from Montana and the next chairman of the committee, appears to hold a different viewpoint. Daines stated that it is clear that you want to see people that are capable of winning general elections and that we are going to continue working that in. Some people believe that a fresh strategy is absolutely necessary. Senator Roy Blunt, a Republican from Missouri, is leaving the Senate, and he recently declared, "We need better candidates." Others place the responsibility on the strategies employed by the candidates. According to Texas Senator John Cornyn, a member of the Republican leadership, "I think the underlying lesson is it takes one sort of campaign to win a primary and it takes another kind of campaign to win a general election. And when you try to run a general election the way you run in a primary, without appealing to a broader base of the population, then you're going to lose," the speaker continued. "You're going to lose." He continued by saying, "That has been shown to us time and time again." In spite of this, Scott maintained that they had high-quality people running for office during this cycle, which he argued supported his decision to abstain from participating in the primaries. The response that Scott provided was, "Well, I think we've got to rely on the voters in the states. It's the state that they're in. I have faith in the constituents." Scott, who had a disagreement with the leader of the Republican majority in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, this year over the party's support for a policy agenda that McConnell opposed, stated that the Republican Party needed to focus on another matter, having a strong national message. "I think that we, as Republicans, ought to have our agenda, and we ought to offer people a legitimate cause for how to vote, why they ought to vote for us." Despite their differences of opinion over Donald Trump, Republican senators across the board came to the consensus that their party has to place a renewed emphasis on voting by mail, an issue that Trump has maligned over the course of the past few years. Senator Joni Ernst, a Republican representing Iowa in the Senate, stated that we've got to find a method to turn out the early vote with our voters. However, this may necessitate having a confrontation with Trump, which Utah Republican Senator Mitt Romney has stated is long overdue. According to what he had to say, I think President Trump has had a very large impact on who's going to win a primary, and it hasn't worked out well. I'm hoping that we'll come to the realization that his endorsement could be the beginning of the end.